Greetings. How do you like my new t-shirt? A friend showed up that I hadn't seen for 40 plus years, named Lloyd Kelly, and this is what he brought me. When you hear his story, you're going to see how it fits in with what I'm going to share with you about this song. This is called "And Rejoice." I wrote it in 2009, and the heart of this song is actually the reverb part where I'm saying, when you walk through the halls of creation, do the sons of Adam hear your voice and rejoice? Or is it all just disharmony? I think you know that many people in the science fields are atheistic evolutionists. Atheism of there being no God is a very recent development in the degeneracy of man. In the Old Testament, we're told the fool has said in his heart, there is no God. But even then, that fool was not saying there's no God that exists. It's just there's no God that pays any attention or that cares about any of this. It's almost like deists. They didn't deny the existence of God. I've got an article called "Atheism, the Atheist in the Bible," and I wrote it a couple of years ago that would be, you might find interesting on this matter. But we're told in Romans chapter 1, and that's really kind of the backdrop to this song. When Paul was talking about the wrath of God, he said, "The wrath of God is revealed from heaven against all ungodliness and unrighteousness of men who suppress the truth in unrighteousness. Because that which is known about God is evident within them, for God made it evident to them." So there's something God has made evident to men, and yet they've suppressed it, denied it in their unrighteousness, buried it. What's this communication that they've buried? "For since the creation of the world," in other words, from the very beginning of when the world was created, "His invisible attributes," God's invisible attributes, His eternal power and divine nature, "have been clearly seen, being understood through what has been made, so they are without excuse." God claims that He has made it known to within people, inside of Him, that there is a God, that He is, through creation. It's like a general revelation that He is. Lloyd, my friend, as a young man, was getting into the medical field, and he wound up becoming a medical technician in laboratories, and he's run laboratories and everything else. And he was telling me that as he was studying cells and the molecular level and atoms and all this swirling around, the organization and the laws governing all this were stunning to him. And when he realized that these same laws are what control the universe, Lloyd knew there's a creator by what he was seeing in his studies. And he had a physics professor that went on to share with him the claims of the God of the Bible as the creator, and Lloyd wound up receiving him as his own God. That's why this is very timely, because Lloyd didn't even know I was going to be doing this. Now, the rest of the song, I talk about Adam and Cain and how God spoke to them and they didn't rejoice. Same thing with Balaam, a prophet, a diviner, and King Saul. They knew who God was. They knew His voice. They rejected it. Even Jesus, when He was here, the lame man by the pool of Bethesda that He healed, that man didn't rejoice either. And Malchus, who had his ear cut off in the garden as they were arresting him, Jesus healed that man. And I said, Malchus, you better have heard that voice. I want you to read up on all of those passages, because one of the problems is we don't trust God. It's in our nature now where we do not trust Him. And in the book of Hebrews, the writer of Hebrews, in a very short span, mentions 3 times a verse from the Psalms. And it says, "Today, if you hear His voice, do not harden your hearts, as when they provoke me." He repeats it a few verses later. "Today, if you hear His voice, do not harden your hearts, as when they provoke me." And then in chapter 4, "Today, if you hear His voice, do not harden your hearts." God talked to the nation of Israel about how they fight against their help. When we become convinced that God is for us and not against us, and that He has plans for us to give us a future and a hope, We will not fight against our health. I believe the primary way that God communicates with us today is through His Word. You can be in the Bible and it'll either be to convict you or to encourage you. And when we hear His voice, our best course of action is to say yes. Now there's been times when I know God has communicated something with me and I react very strongly against it. But if I start thinking rightly, I will repent from that, turn from that, and embrace it, because whatever He's telling me is always for my benefit. I believe God is big enough to communicate in many ways to us. We need to be very careful that we are hearing His voice. And when you do know you hear it, He says, do not harden your heart. Say yes. I do know this. When we say yes to Him, and if it's the true voice of the true and living God, that is something we will not regret. So thanks for listening. And like I always say, so, now what? Subscribe. New original Christian song every 2 weeks. Or watch a couple other videos. There or there. Or you can click the promo button below that tells you about my website, where I have dozens of original ebooks and articles on Bible topics that are just waiting for you. Or if you want, you can just click that button right there, go right straight to the website. So, thanks for watching. See you next time. Listen, learn,